In this video, I'm going to break down everything that happens in the first 25 issues of Spawn. What's going on, everybody? I'm GemMint, and today we're going to start part 1 of my Spawn read-through. It's been over 10 years since I last read Spawn. I read issues 1 through 242 before I sold my entire run and started collecting key issues. I did jump back on with issue 300, and I kept up with it for a couple of years, but it's been a while since I've read modern Spawn as well. But we're going to jump back to the beginning with the first deluxe edition, collecting the first 25 issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardcover, but it's mostly going to be about the story. Before we jump into it though, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notifications so you're notified every time a video drops. Let's jump into it. All right, by now most of you guys have probably seen the deluxe editions. It comes with the hardcover slipcase, similar design to what the hardcover itself has. Here is the hardcover, but you know, this is more of a review of the story. So here's the cover pages with the little Spawn skull. When I was reading it this time, I kind of thought, man, that's pretty similar to the Punisher logo, right? If you think about it. Then you open up to a Todd McFarlane New York City skyline. Love seeing this. Collecting issues 1 through 25. Todd McFarlane writing the stories for the first 7 issues, then he does 12 and 13, then 21 through 25. He taps Alan Moore to do issue 8, Neil Gaiman for issue 9, that's the Angela issue. Dave Sim does issue 10, Frank Miller does issue 11, Grant Morrison does 16 through 19, and then as far as the pencils, Todd does most of the heavy lifting, but he gets Greg Capullo for issue 16 through 20 and Mark Silvestri for issue 25. Pretty cool to see how many heavy hitters Todd got for the first 25 issues of Spawn. Then it gives us the contents. Highly recommend reading the introductions to these. Gives you so much more context. And then you get some quotes from a Todd McFarlane Miller World interview throughout the book as well. All right, so then we jump into issue 1 from May of 1992, Questions. I like how they did this with the image logo and this keyhole view into the first cover. And then all of the issues have the Virgin cover, which is amazing to see. We open up, we get a shot of Earth, New York City, and we get our first glimpse at Spawn. Now, this is a reoccurring theme throughout the series. I feel like he borrowed this from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, if I recall, but you have CNN, which is kind of like mainstream news. Then you have the conspiracy theorist, kind of like Alex Jones type of guy, and then the entertainment news. Spawn, Al Simmons, he has flashbacks of his life. He remembers that he loved somebody. He sees these glimpses of the devil, of dying, of him making a deal, and then coming back to Earth 5 years later. And then we get Spawn right here. So first of all, the artwork, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be saying that a lot throughout here, but the artwork is incredible. The story I love too, man. Big stakes, heaven and hell, coming back for love. This is our first glimpse of his energy meter, which runs out. He learns a little bit about that throughout this story. And then in traditional 90s comic fashion, you get this sideways double page spread of Spawn. First big image of Spawn. Here we get introduced to Sam and Twitch. So these are some detectives. Spawn drops down. He helps somebody being mugged. We can see Spawn attacking the mugger and launching him out the window. Bad idea. So as he saves this woman from being mugged, I mean, he scares the hell out of her. But then he gets his first episode where it's a flashback of memories pouring in. He sees a vision of this woman. He knows that he loves her. He sees his own death. He finally comes to as that woman is consoling him, and just love the expression on his face. Still trying to piece everything together. These news excerpts, I was kind of joking about this during our live stream, but I did read them this time. It helped reading them kind of in their voices. But it gives you a perspective of what is going on in this world as we go back to the streets, the alleys that Spawn will claim as his home. But he realizes that he had a wife. He knows that he was a mercenary, and he knows that he made this deal. He got a bum deal. He made a deal with the devil. He came back to life. He wanted to come to see his wife. That's all he cared about. But the devil, Malbolgia, had a funny way of going about it. His whole body is burnt to a crisp. He's a monster. He can't just go back to Wanda, his wife, and reconcile. And there's another big reason why as well. We'll wait till we get there to talk about it. But then here is a devil. Malbolgia is one of the devils, one of the circles of hell, which is kind of a nod to Dante's Inferno. And that's how hell works in the Spawn universe. And then we jump into issue 2, where we'll get introduced to another supporting character that will remain in Spawn lore till this day, which is the Violator. Well, you got the Clown and the Violator. So here goes issue 2's cover with no trade dress. Looks amazing. I love the artwork that was put into the dialogue as well. And that's really prevalent in the Todd issues. We know that he's been placed here to give Spawn a hard time, and then we go back to Spawn trying to figure out what his next move is. Spawn perching up on the crosses. So he has this inner monologue, and then you see Clown trying to catch his attention, which he does. And then we see the Clown's alter ego, the Violator. So when we're introduced to the Violator, he's just wrecking havoc throughout the streets of New York City. He's killing top mob bosses. He wants the mob to assume that the Spawn is responsible for these killings. And here's our first full look at Violator. Iconic image here. Another recap from the news organizations. Spawn tries to use his newfound powers to make himself look like his old self, but he changes into this white guy with blonde hair. And this is when we find out that Spawn is black. So some kind of cruel joke that Malebolgia played on him, that he can make himself look human, but like the exact opposite of what he was. Then we have the dynamic between Sam and Twitch. Sam is this overweight, disgusting cop, and then Twitch is like this little puny pipsqueak. In one of these issues, they're referred to as Ren and Stimpy, which I thought was kind of funny. Then back to the Violator. He's been ripping out these mob bosses' hearts, so that's how they've all been found, which makes it paranormal. Who is ripping out the hearts out of humans' chests? Then he gets another flashback. This time he gets a memory of his old boss, Jason Wynn. So Jason Wynn, not to get too far ahead, but is responsible for the death of Al Simmons. And what's funny about Jason Wynn, I forgot how quickly from him being introduced that he becomes the anti-Spawn. We'll see that when we get there. I didn't want to forget about it. So here goes Violator, just throwing hearts all around. Spawn coming out of that most recent memory episode. He wakes up to the Clown. So we have our first interaction between the Clown and Spawn, besides when Clown was on the building. And look at the height difference here. It really feels like a Danny DeVito impersonation a little bit. The Clown artwork is great. And as Spawn walks away from Clown, Clown just flexes, turns into Violator. Spawn never even sees him change there, but that was a pretty cool last panel. And then another little excerpt from Todd here with Miller World. All great reads. Issue 3, big virgin cover here. He finally remembers his wife's name, that her name is Wanda Blake, and talks about how she didn't take his last name when they got married. He's Al Simmons, she's Wanda Blake, and how that her grandmother always hated that, and setting the seed of the relationship between Al and Wanda and her grandmother. So Spawn, he's been hanging out here in the back alleys where all the homeless people are. They'll start to show up soon. Then we get another shot at Malebolgia. I was always super impressed with the Malebolgia and the hierarchy. You had the Violator, which was this grotesque monster. Then you had an even larger one with Malebolgia. Gives us as a reader some more context as to what's actually happening to Al. Back to Sam and Twitch. They're trying to figure out who can be responsible for ripping out the hearts of these mob bosses, and then cue to who the responsible party is, the Clown and the Violator. Spawn goes back to his old building, the CIA headquarters in New York, to grab some files. We get an idea of this supervisor and how inappropriate he is with his employees. Now, as Spawn is doing so and making these type of threats, Malebolgia is encouraging his violent behavior. Now, in those files, Spawn reads up on what his wife has been up to for the last 5 years, and it's heartbreaking when he finds out that she is not only remarried, but she also has a child, which he could never give her. They thought she was the problem, but he finds out that it was him that was unable to give her a child. So he turns into the white guy that he can change into to pay a visit to Wanda, who is stunning in this white dress, her dog growling at him. We get introduced to Wanda Blake and her daughter Cyan. So Al has another episode as he sees all this, and he's woken up by not only Wanda, but his best friend Terry Fitzgerald, who is the one who married his wife. So very painful. Not only did she remarry and have a kid that he couldn't provide, but it ends up being from his best friend Terry. Spawn is pissed. We can see that he's been losing energy. It gets drained as he uses his power, so he hasn't learned about that fully yet, but he will. As the Clown runs up on him with an Image t-shirt. Love the branding, and I love the fact that they reference Youngbloods. Like, this is in the same world as the Youngbloods, as Savage Dragon, and all those other Image launch titles. So here goes Clown changing into the Violator in front of Spawn for the first time. He's ready to fight, but quickly gets his heart plucked, and Violator thinks, man, that was easy. Already took down the new Hell Spawn, but Spawn is actually built a little bit different than what he was told. He's actually able to function without his heart. He's able to put his heart back in his chest, and this greatly disturbs the Violator. Issue 4 has that great Violator cover here, so another little quote from Todd from that Miller World interview. Nice to be able to see this without the trade dress. Violator holding Spawn's heart, but Spawn is standing right in front of him. Violator just freaking out that he doesn't need a heart, that he's more powerful than he's been told. We can see the energy draining, putting the heart back in his own chest, and delivering a devastating blow to the Violator. Again, the artwork is just stunning throughout this volume. Most of this issue is just battle between Spawn and Violator. They're ripping each other's limbs off, they're blasting each other, they're draining energy, until Malebolgia has to stop everything and explain what his plan is to his two flunkies. And we learn that Al, the Hell Spawns, are being recruited to Malebolgia's army that he's preparing against God. He heals Spawn without having to use his own energy. Violator saying, "Hey, what about me?" Gives him his arm back. And then we have the aftermath of this whole interaction. Again, I love how legitimate Todd made Image feel. Like they're wearing Image merch. They're referencing other Image titles. Here's another example of that. You got Savage Dragon and these kids running up on Spawn saying, "Oh, there he is. There's that new hero." Spawn thinks they're talking about him, but they're talking about Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. So cool shared universe that was built here in the beginning issues of Spawn. We end, Wanda starts having more memories of Al. She can feel him existing in this world ever since he showed back up. Then we get to issue 5, which is Justice. This is a difficult issue to read, man. I remember as a kid, but it's harder to read as an adult, as a father. You have Billy Kincaid, this child murderer that's being released from jail. He's an ice cream man. He lures kids to the ice cream truck. Sam and Twitch are there at his release. They don't want him to be released. They know that he's a psychopath, but he's getting off. Flashback to our news coverage. Flash to Wanda and Terry over here with Cyan. I like the parallels that they draw here with Cyan sleeping with her cat, but Spawn sleeping next to garbage. Here's Sam and Twitch. So they're not supposed to trail Billy Kincaid. He's been exonerated. He's free. Leave him alone. But they can't do that. He's back as an ice cream man, and he's already back to his old tricks. Man, hella disturbing right here with his kid's fingers, man. And then the whole time is flashing back to Cyan, which is around that same age, and she's with Wanda. Now here we get introduced to the homeless guys. So where Spawn is sleeping in the Bowery, where all these homeless people are, they end up forming a bond because of all of the things that start happening really since Spawn's arrival. Here we have a cop car going through the alley, just no regard. They actually kill one of the homeless guys, which pisses them off, rightfully so. And that's where Spawn learns that Billy Kincaid has been freed. This is somebody that he actually had an interaction with as Al Simmons before he died. Looks like he dropped the ball on letting him live, letting him go, and now he's vowed to not let that happen a second time. So here's a flashback to what happened when Billy was first arrested. It implicates his boss, Jason Wynn, and this is when Al started to not blindly follow orders from the CIA, from his boss, Jason. They started to butt heads, which would lead to the death of Al Simmons. Love these big cinematic shots, the huge cape flowing. Sam and Twitch are on the stakeout outside of Billy Kincaid's house where they're not supposed to be. Spawn shows up at the same time. They catch a glimpse of Spawn going around the corner. They can see his cape right here. And by the time Sam and Twitch break into Billy's house, Spawn's already got there. It's too late. They're both gone. But they can see that he recently has killed another child, which, again, incredibly hard to read as an adult who's had kids and everything. Now, when they go back to their office, they find Billy Kincaid, and Spawn has killed him. He's stuck ice cream cones and scoopers in him and ice cream in his mouth. They find this dead body in their office. So that's not good for Sam and Twitch. I mean, it's good that Billy Kincaid's off the streets, but this is not good for Sam and Twitch, which we'll see. Before we move on to the next issue, if you're looking to pick up any of these collected editions, you got to check out organicpricebooks.com. Not only are they heavily discounted with great packaging and fast shipping, but you can also save an additional $2 by using code GemMint at checkout. And if you're overseas, you got to check out comicsbugle.com. They have free shipping, no taxes or import fees if you're in the EU. They're also heavily discounted with great packaging made from recyclable material, fast shipping, and you can save $5 off your first order by using code GemMint at checkout. Continue to shop at comicsbugle.com and you'll build up rewards points, which can help discount further books. All right, issue 6, man, we get introduced to Overkill, which some call him Overkill under their breath. Overkill is a cyborg. He's an enforcer for the mafia. They've been losing mob bosses. 7 of them have been killed with their hearts ripped out. So they're sending in this cyborg from the motherland, from Italy, to come and figure out who has been messing with their family. So here we have the mob boss. He sent some of his goons to the Bowery to try to figure out who this person is, killing their lieutenants. Here we can see Wanda, Terry, and Cyan living in their beautiful home with the fence. The mob enforcers showing very little regard for life as they're killing homeless people, trying to get this vigilante to crawl out. They don't get the right one. Spawn's the one that crawls out when he sees that they've murdered one of the homeless people. Here's a look at the meeting between the other heads of families, and they all agree to use Overkill to take down this threat. So here he goes, showing his size and how he just walks through the wall here. With that, okay, we have the first interaction between Overkill and Spawn. And this is where we find out that he's not actually human, as Spawn's choking with his chains. He's still able to breathe, or seemingly doesn't need to breathe. He throws a punch at Spawn, who is in between these 2 gears, and boom, gets his right arm stuck between those gears. And that's where we really find out what he is. We find out that he's a cyborg, as you can see right here. Look at the paneling too, man. Again, Todd was just on another level. You got the paneling with these lines, and you have the blood lines. Spawn gets beat down by Overkill, but he uses his powers to heal. Then he figures out, maybe I shouldn't be using these powers. Let me go back to what I know, go back to my old ways. And he visits a secret stash that he had left prior before he died with all these guns and ammunition. And now he's gonna take the fight to Overkill with his new weaponry. Spawn with all the ammo, all the chains, the skulls. To me, all this stuff still holds up. I'm loving it. Spawn doesn't even get to leave his stash spot. You have army men breaking through there. He now has to use energy to teleport out of there. And then we get our first glimpse of what teleporting looks like in the Spawn universe. So basically all of your molecules splitting and separating and being transported somewhere else and coming back together. You have the homeless people. Now they're getting a little bit closer to Spawn. They rip his mask off, and they're not as appalled as Spawn thought they would be. They just kind of laugh it off. Vito Gravano, that's the name of the mob boss. So Overkill has to come by and talk about his failure. That's not a good look. Then Spawn gets another flashback. He learns a little bit more each time he has a flashback. In this vision, he's getting a glimpse of the man who actually killed him. He doesn't see who it is yet, but that'll come more into fruition. It's actually a spoiler or a teaser with that skull face, but this is Al getting his face blown off, comes back to, and at the same time, Wanda is also having visions and dreams. Spawn interaction with the homeless. Again, man, the detail is just incredible. This was such a treat to come back and reread. Wanda, she can't get the blonde guy who visited her out of her mind. There was something about him. I mean, it was a weird interaction. He passed out and fainted in front of them. She goes to check on the place of employment where he said he was from, and come to find out that they have no record of that person. So she's starting to connect the dots with Al, who was the white guy that showed up at her doorstep. Anyway, Al right now, he's strapped up. He's ready to take down the mob boss. Boom, big gun at his head. Look at this straight 90s art right here. Spawn wants him to have Overkill meet him at the pier at midnight. So here goes round 2. And it's an incredible scene between Spawn and Overkill. Stabs him in the eye. They're blasting at each other with their weapons. Spawn pulls off his mask to, I guess, try to intimidate Overkill, or to let him know, look, man, I really don't give a damn. And then, boom, the fatal blow. Spawn blasting Overkill with his huge weapon. Incredible. So now Overkill is totally destroyed. Spawn is just toying with him at this point. His eyeball flies out, his arms, his legs. He is totally dismantled. Spawn leaves with an explosion, and you think this is the end of Overkill, but he gets put back together. Issue 8, In Heaven. This was a great issue. This was by Alan Moore. We all remember the homage cover, but I feel like this cover takes away from how great this issue was. So we come back to Billy Kincaid. We kind of see what happens to people when they die. Billy Kincaid spawns like Matrix style in this garden, and we find out that he's in one of the levels of hell, and that all of the demons from the different levels recruit newly deceased humans based on whatever they did in their life. That kind of determines what level of hell they should go to. So he finds others. They're kind of walking through, trying to figure out what happened to them. They're all realizing that they've died. Here's the first demon, who looks like an angel, coming down to pick one of the humans. There's a little girl here, so already Billy Kincaid is plotting. You have this Queen of the Jungle kind of archetype. Billy Kincaid now realizing that he died at the hands of Spawn. And it's Alan Moore, man. It's what you would expect. Here's another demon. He's posing as Elvis to get this guy, taking him to one of the circles. Queen of the Jungle, she gets taken by this arachnid and gets put into kind of his Matrix-style cocoon. He doesn't have the confidence of a killer like he once had, man. He's scared of Spawn and thinking about his death. Right when he goes to kill her and kind of get it out of his system to kind of clear his head, the little girl's like, it's about time. Took you longer than I thought. And then boom, one of the Violator's brothers, man. So we get another kind of monster demon like we've seen before. This demon emerges out of that skin. So this is the Vindicator, the brother of Violator, part of the Fleabiak brothers. We learn more about that in the Violator miniseries, which is not collected in any of these, man. I might have to grab those singles. So now he's running from the Vindicator, going up this spiral. And this is when we learn about 8 levels of hell, and he gets explained all of them. Now, what they did for the 7th layer, they set something up for a future storyline. Like, he explains what's going on the first layer, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. 7th is closed off and nobody knows what's there. But we will find out what's there in one of the later issues. But he's from the 8th circle, which is the Malbolge, ran by Malbolgia. So the lore that Alan Moore dropped here was incredible. You see the change of heart of Billy Kincaid. He's no longer that vicious killer. He's crying, he's sad, he's learned his fate, and he's part of Hell's army now. So what an incredible issue. Then we have issue 9, Todd McFarlane and Neil Gaiman. So this is when we get introduced to not only Angela, but the medieval Spawn. And we learn about how there are spawns throughout history and how often Malbolgia creates a new one. It's once every 50 years, once a century kind of a thing. So we see how Angela plays the victim here in order to hunt down the spawns. She is a spawn hunter. We see the fight between Angela and medieval Spawn. 800 years ago, now we're in the present time. Angela dressed up like Pretty Woman walking through New York City. And then we get a glimpse of what's to come with the David Sim issue. So it's actually a glimpse of that 7th layer of hell that was introduced in the last issue. Iconic panel. We'll talk about it when we get there. It's Spawn having a vision, and then he's back to life, back to reality with the homeless people in the Bowery, in the alleyways. This is when we get introduced to somebody who will play a major role here, Cagliostro. He knows about spawns. He knows about Al. He knows way more than he should as Al spawns in a case of Ripple for him. But we see Angela kind of reporting to work here, and that's when we learn that you have layers of hell, but then you have layers of heaven, and you have angels, and you have a whole other faction. So now Angela knows who the new hell Spawn is and quickly tries to take out Spawn before he gets too powerful, too knowledgeable about what's going on here. The fight was incredible too, because we see the kind of symbiote of the costume and how he jumps into the puddle of his cape and drags Angela down to this pocket dimension. And look at the color change here from the bright, realistic world into the green darkness that he takes her into, and you can only see their teeth. Angela has to retreat. She leaves behind her staff. And this was a cool transition into that one shot, that kind of non-canon issue. Spawn clicks the button on her staff, and he gets transported somewhere. Energy bar not even registering anymore. Cagliostro walks away with his Ripple. But then we get into issue 10, Dave Sim, creator of Cerebus. Here's the forward by Dave Sim, talking about the relationship with Todd and how this was omitted from trade paperbacks and the kind of handshake agreement that you can use my stuff, I can use your stuff if we did it together. Here's a sketch of the cover, or I guess this was a cover that wasn't used because the color was the one that was actually used. This was a great read too, man. So here's the Virgin cover. Cerebus is a black and white comic, and Spawn has been transported to other dimension where, yeah, he's Spawn, but he's also not Spawn. So it's kind of a recap issue of what's going on with Al Simmons and how he became Spawn, learning about the 8 layers of hell, except for layer 7, which is Erebus. So not Cerebus, but Erebus. So that's where Spawn has been transported to. Here's that blocked door where we couldn't see what was going on there with Billy Kincaid. But now Spawn goes in there. You have all these hooded, I was going to say characters, and then I was going to say creators, but that's what it is. These are representing comic book creators, how they're bound and they're not able to really own their own creations. So this was a huge panel here, and it was something I guess they were a little bit unsure if they were going to be able to do, but it's the representation of all these Marvel and DC characters and how the creators don't own them. And again, this is why this was kind of like a non-canon one-shot. It gave us more of an explanation of that 7th level of hell, but it was also kind of a very meta issue that tackled creators' rights. And look at Todd doing Superman with the Spawn vibe. Great issue though, man. Really dope. And this is basically Spawn blowing up that prison. This is Todd blowing up that prison. Look at the Violator, made up of money. It goes black and white when Cerebus meets up with Spawn in a world where Spawn has a daughter, and this I'm not Spawn thing. This is the life that you could have had. Cerebus leaves. It's almost like a Ghost of Christmas Past kind of thing. A flex on how Todd and Dave own their own characters. That's kind of what this was. So then we get the Frank Miller issue. Spawn is back from Erebus, and he's back in the Bowery. Homeless people saying, bro, what's going on? Are you good? Spawn wakes up. He's telling them that he's not just sleeping one off. He's not just drunk. And then Spawn gets attacked. There's this large blast, and we learn that the Bowery is in the middle of this gang war. Frank Miller creates these two different factions, and they have their big bruisers who puncture a hole through Spawn. Shocked to see when Spawn is still alive, kind of like when Violator saw that same thing. A girl gets killed, so of course Spawn wants to take revenge. Then we see the other faction, so the Nerd Gang, and then you have the Creeps, which is the other gang. Here we get a glimpse at them. The Creeps come to pick up one of their own. That's the girl that was killed there, which leads to an altercation in the Bowery with Spawn now in the middle. So the Creeps versus the Nerds. It was Frank Miller, but I didn't really enjoy this one as much as I did the Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Dave Sims stuff, but pretty cool little gang war. All right, issues 12 to 15. Todd McFarlane is back as writer, and now we're going to find out who actually killed Spawn. So here is a little teaser of the logos. You got Spawn and Chapel. A lot of brooding on top of crosses in churches. Another double-page spread, horizontal. Al having flashbacks to his wedding with Wanda, how Terry was his best friend and his best man. He doesn't really feel resentment towards Terry. He gets it. He was there for her. They kind of bonded over his death, and one thing leads to another. Then we're back here to Jason Wynn. So now we're going to learn more about his old boss. Here is a great scene. I really always enjoyed this, even as a kid. Al coming to visit Granny Blake. She's blind. He confides in her. He tells her that there is an afterlife. I just thought that was a sweet thing to do. More of our news sources letting us know what's going on in the world. Here's Sam and Twitch. Now Sam and Twitch, they're being punished. They're not able to go back on the street. They have to stay in their office because obviously with Billy Kincaid showing up dead in their office, it's not a good look for them, and they do have to confess that they were staking out his house when they weren't supposed to. So they're kind of sidelined for a few issues. This is the first time that Terry now is feeling the heat from Jason Wynn. Terry is being accused for all the things that Al Simmons is doing, breaking into the CIA headquarters, stealing the cache of weapons. Obviously, Al Simmons can't do it. He's dead, so it's got to be Terry. So this is a plot that starts here where basically everybody's going to be coming for Terry. Back to the Bowery, drinking with the boys. One of the bums puts on Spawn's mask, and again, we're learning that it has a mind of its own and suffocates him. This conversation will lead to yet another memory bomb, and this is where that face starts coming in clearer, and Spawn realizes that one of the other enforcers for the CIA, Chapel, is the one that actually killed him. Issue 13, let's jump into it. I always like this cover too, man. We get a flashback to Bad Rock from the Youngbloods, and it really makes me want to read Youngbloods. I love how they tied everything in. Even Overkill, the next time we see him and then that confrontation ends, it tells you like, oh, this continues in Youngblood 7. Now we see Chapel and what he's up to. He's fighting with the Youngbloods, and then here we have Spawn. He shows up. So you got a little interaction between Youngbloods, Spawn, and Chapel. Spawn teleports himself and Chapel out of there, so now no more Youngbloods. Terry is panicking. He's worried about what's going on. He's being confronted and threatened by agents from his own organization. He doesn't want to tell Wanda. Wanda has taken a stance of not wanting to know what her husband's involved in ever since the death of Al. So he doesn't tell her. Flashback to Sam and Twitch, stuck in their office, can't do nothing. Spawn has transported him and Chapel to Africa. It's where Al and Chapel had a mission together back in his former life, taking his revenge out on his killer and letting him know who he is. He calls him something that only Al would have known, scares Chapel that he knows this is Al Simmons back from the dead. Here's a little flashback on Jason Wynn giving the okay for him to pull the trigger. All right, more Spawn and Chapel. Chapel stabs him in the chest. Obviously, that's not going to do anything. Spawn doesn't kill Chapel, but he disfigures his face. He's permanently disfigured him with that skull face that the skin will never grow back. Todd's still doing the stuff here for Myths. So you got a clown Violator cover. I always liked how the clown makeup was similar to Spawn's chest emblem. Later on in issues, they tie that into Malbolgia. But this is cool. So Clown is trying to talk to these street kids, telling them stories of him in the past, telling about how he fought the medieval Spawn. But what's great about this issue is Clown is giving his version of it. We're seeing what really happened, but Clown is lying, of course, and telling his side of the story. So it was a very well-written issue by Todd. Sam and Twitch get exonerated. They're back on the streets. They have been found to not have anything to do with Billy Kincaid's death, so that was what that was all about. Here's Spawn brooding in the back alleys. Power levels are getting lower. He keeps having to use them. Sam and Twitch want to follow up on Spawn. Remember, they saw his cape creep around the corner to Billy Kincaid's house. They've tracked his activities down to the Bowery itself. So now you have Sam and Twitch with all the homeless people interrogating them. Spawn's chilling up, brooding as always. Back to Clown, telling the story, which is weird. Like, medieval Spawn, it keeps making it seem like either that was his mother he was saving or that was his wife he was saving. It kind of goes back and forth a few times. I guess it's just you can't trust what the Clown's saying in his story, and that's the whole point. Showing the fight what actually happened as Violator is telling it from his perspective, how he burnt him and how that this action led to the myth of dragons. Issue 15. To end this story, medieval Spawn with Violator's head on his sword. Here's Clown still trying to talk to these kids and impress them. He's been charred beyond reproach from the fire that Violator was breathing toward him. Again, the artwork is incredible. I mean, what more can you say? The paneling, the detail, one long battle. It kind of reminds me of like Curse of the Spawn. I wonder if that's where the inspiration came from. But medieval Spawn off with his head. He decapitates the Violator. Of course, that's not the story he's telling the kids. Here's what the myths of the Violator would turn into with green fire-breathing dragons. We see how Malbolgia, he was actually happy with what he did because even though he lost to medieval Spawn, it let Malbolgia know the potential of one of his new recruits. So it was a win-win for Malbolgia. Spawn hanging out in the back alleys, getting into a fight with one of the restaurant owners that he's behind his building. Spawn loses it and beats him down, shows him what he really looks like. That's the first time that Spawn really feels like these back alleys are his home and he's going to defend them. Terry's being harassed by these agents, and we'll see a lot more of that moving forward. We've got more MegaCon announcements from JPG and Paraz Entertainment. To celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Do You Poo, he's releasing some of his holy grail Do You Poo covers, the Obey Poo, the first hip-hop covers, and the first 8-bit covers. These are going to be limited to 1 out of 1 medals and 10 out of 10 foils. They're going to be teaming up with Do You Poo creator Marat Michaels for some of the most sought-after Do You Poo covers to ever be released. This is going to be going down on the That Spider-Man Booth Whatnot channel during MegaCon, so make sure you not only follow that account, but bookmark their MegaCon shows. Next, we get Grant Morrison and Greg Capullo. Todd does not do the artwork on these next issues. Leave it to Grant Morrison to give us a Spawn lore drop. So this Simmonsville, you have these two soldiers. They're walking through Simmonsville, and it doesn't look right. You have like buildings where buildings shouldn't be. It's just kind of like really weird. And then you have more of these demons that jump out of the building and they attack these two soldiers. So we learn that this is kind of a training center. It was created by the psychoplasm of Al Simmons as he was dying. It's not a real place, but it introduces what psychoplasm is and the basis of Spawn's powers. Very Grant Morrison-y. It's Jason Wynn showing one of these generals. They've harnessed this new thing called psychoplasm. This is the first time that we're letting the U.S. government, a major veil, see what's going on. He doesn't really seem to get it at first, but then Morrison explains to us what's going on with the psychoplasm. So we get another little flashback to Spawn dying with Chapel, but he wants to figure out who gave Chapel the heads up, and this is when he first learns that it's his old boss, Jason Wynn. Some wannabe arsons tearing up the Bowery, and then Spawn, the protector, he comes down to make sure that that doesn't happen. Then flashback to the office where Angela went. So these are the Angels. We get to see where the Angels' headquarters are. They have a space station that's orbiting the Earth. Here are some of those beings, and they're talking about selecting a subject, or they've already selected one, who's going to be their antithesis to the Spawn, their anti-Spawn. Jason Wynn is training kind of like Kingpin style, hired ninjas. He's fighting them, and then we see him get teleported. Again, molecules and gloop and all that stuff. They're going to turn Jason Wynn right away into anti-Spawn. When we learn about the psychoplasm and everything, this is one of the things that plays a major role. Spawn visiting Al Simmons' grave and finding out that Al Simmons is still in the grave. So who is Spawn? What is Spawn? What's he made up of? So here's Jason Wynn being transformed into the anti-Spawn. All right, issue 17, more Greg Capullo, more Grant Morrison. Here's Malbolgia laughing with the earth in the palm of his hand. This is where Malbolgia gives us a big lore drop. Plucks Spawn from the graveyard, explains to him what's going on with the Psychoplasm and Simmons Town and what he's made of, what his powers are made of. Anti-Spawn, Jason Wynn getting shot back down to Earth, just as Malbolgia plucks Spawn down as well so that they can have the confrontation. I love everything about the Anti-Spawn costume, except how lame is this belt buckle? The Spawn logo, what it lined through it. This was kind of interesting, a little different take on the news organizations. I guess that's because it's Grant Morrison. So we're seeing their breakdown, but we're seeing Terry Fitzgerald watching those breakdowns. So that's kind of meta. That's very Morrison of himself, right? So they're talking about Al Simmons. Stuff from Wanda's past is being reported on the news. Al Simmons, Jason Wynn. Jason Wynn has been missing for 2 days. He's what the news organizations think is like a low-level CIA guy. They don't really realize how much power and influence he has. As we flash to him as Anti-Spawn, fighting with Spawn. So now we get that battle, which is incredibly drawn and action-packed, just like everything else in this book. Jason Wynn doesn't really know what he is as Anti-Spawn. He just knows that he's this warrior and that he's supposed to fight this enemy. Here's Major Vale. He goes back to Simmons Town, but he sees that it's being destroyed. So the government is definitely interested in this Psychoplasm, this new material that they can weaponize. Anti-Spawn thinks he has the upper hand. He's ready to psionic blade his ass. Again, that logo is so goofy to me. So this issue ends seemingly with incoming death of Spawn. Of course, that's not what's going to happen. All right, part 3, again, Morrison and Capullo. Here we are where we left off. He's got this kind of light blade, but the homeless people now are protecting Spawn, so the tables have turned. Like I said, they've grown this bond. The homeless people worship Spawn. He's like their savior. So as they all, Spider-Man style, like you want him, you got to go through us, give Spawn just enough time with that distraction to gain the upper hand. And this is why, as a kid, I didn't even know that the art was done by somebody else. You had Greg Capullo stepping in, and he really did a great job of matching Todd's style. I mean, talk about big shoes to fill, man. Huge Greg Capullo fan. Spawn takes down the Anti-Spawn. He uses his powers, of course. So with that, the Anti-Spawn, Jason Wynn, is transported back to the space station where the angels are. We see another guy like Cagliostro, again dropping some lore on Spawn, knows more than what he should, gives him a blank business card, tells him that we'll be in touch. But here we go, Al Simmons destroying Simmons Town. Of course, we can't have a place like this existing in this world. And they kind of gave it a little bit of a lore like Doom. Like they've opened up a gate to hell, and this is the demons coming up out of it. So very Doom-esque. That military guy that was interested in the Psychoplasm, Spawn kills him, you're dead. Simmonsville was fragments of his imagination, so the church where he got married, his childhood home, whatever. But he does take the memory of him on the boat with Wanda, the day where he asked her to marry him. He takes that memory and he saves it, and then he visits Wanda at her house, and he gives the memory to her, which is a beautiful scene, man. I mean, yo, a lot of emotion. Issue 19, still Grant Morrison, still Greg Capullo, but this is a 2-part story, and we get Tom Orzechowski who finishes it, but we get introduced to Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini plays a huge role here, so it flashes back to Nagasaki, Japan, 1945. Atomic bomb goes off, of course. And we learn how the demons of hell, they want to see what the effects on nuclear explosions will have against humans. They want to see kind of like an experiment, so they let that whole thing go down. Here's a quick flashback to Simmons in the Soviet Union on one of his missions. Spawn's woken up by a grocery cart Molotov cocktail. So we have this kind of arsonist bomb maker who gets introduced. Before Spawn is able to really run him down, though, that's when Harry Houdini bamfs in, grabs Spawn by the cape, and then we get this Harry Houdini story, which sounds wacky. I guess it is wacky, but it's really good as well. So again, the news giving us an idea of what's going on here. We see the punk kid who ends up being like a rich kid in New York City's little Ukraine. So it talks about Chinatown. It talks about, you know, all these little areas of New York City. So this story has to do with little Ukraine in New York City and this punk kid, rich kid, who is this arsonist. And the story here is that there's an atomic weapon that these Ukrainian people are going to use. They're setting up this play at the strip club. And then we get introduced to a little bit more lore. You have this place called the Overlap. This is like a reality that's in between heaven, hell, and earth. And this is where you have these demons discussing the nuclear capabilities and what's going on now with Harry Houdini and how he's visited Spawn. So you can see all these demons kind of just in their watchtower of sorts. Here's this punk Dennis the Menace kid crafting another bomb. So Harry Houdini is the one that explains to Spawn the nature of his costume's powers and how he's able to use those powers without depleting his energy reserves, and how his chains and his cape can rely on instinct, how they're attached to his nervous system. So really, Houdini was used as a lore drop for Spawn. And then this issue ends again with just Terry getting harassed by CIA agents. That's all going to play in the last arc. Here's the second half of Showtime. It's still Greg Capullo, but Tom on the story. Again, explaining how Harry Houdini is able to defy the law of physics. He's not really defying them. He just explains kind of how he hacked the universe, I guess, in a sense. Spawn dressed up as this chauffeur, the Ukrainian dude from the strip club. He needs a detonator, and that's what ties into this kid. He gets the kid to make him a detonator for the atomic device. Here's the plutonium. He goes to make the threat during the play, as we see the demons, again, talk about their plan and what they hope to see with the nuclear device going off. Here we have Spawn saving Terry Fitzgerald. So now everyone's kind of rendezvousing here at this play. The Ukrainian guy sets off the timer, but with the shoddy work from the punk kid, he can't turn off the atomic blast. So Spawn takes it with his newfound powers, puts it into this pocket dimension, which we later find out was the underway itself. So those demons that wanted to know the effects of the bomb, now they get to see what effects it has on them. Kid gets arrested, Ukrainian guy gets arrested. Spawn gets his face split in that battle. So that's a big deal. Yeah, the bomb goes off in the underway. Harry Houdini does all this stuff, and then he transports himself back to 1916 to show up in his magic trick. So that was kind of like a cool tie together with Houdini. Issues 21 through 25 are Todd McFarlane, except for issue 25 is Mark Silvestri art. So again, star-studded cast, always love this cover. And now we have one of the homeless guys stitching Spawn's face up with a shoelace. So we get that classic sewed together Spawn face. Another interaction between Spawn and the homeless people, and these are his people, solidifying those relationships more. Jason Wynn is returned. He's kind of getting some flack from the president and from the government on his whereabouts for the last 2 days. He is embarrassed. He doesn't really remember what happened either. More and more pressure coming down towards Terry Fitzgerald, especially now that Jason Wynn has been embarrassed. He needs a fall guy. Terry Fitzgerald is the patsy, whether or not he's guilty or what have you. Sam and Twitch, they're busting heads out here trying to get some answers on what's going on with Spawn. Spawn gets a heads up that we got some more trouble in the Bowery. We have somebody from the mob also looking for Spawn, so they're picking on the homeless people. Spawn comes, of course, he's going to protect his people. Another rip off the mask and scare the hell out of the guy. And look how he does the mask this time with this elongated jaw. Look at the hand with the spikes. This guy works for Vito Gravano, that mob boss that we saw earlier. And look at this series of panels as Spawn gets closer and his eyes get bigger in the reflection of the other guy's eye. Come on, man. The guy comes crawling back. He gets fired because of his failure. We find out that Overkill has been getting some repairs done to him, so he's going to get Overkill back with armor that can withstand the weaponry that Spawn has. Another news breakdown. This is the hunt, and the hunt really refers to Terry Fitzgerald, man. Everybody and their mother is going to be going after Terry Fitzgerald. So here is Gravano's accountant, who has been keeping him squeaky clean. That's who Spawn decides to press for some answers to figure out where Victor is. Some of his enforcers break into the accountant's office, and Spawn uses his chains instinctively to ricochet all the bullets, launches the desk at him, kills those two bozos. He gets some important files from the accountant, which will come into play later. And look at this series of panels. It zooms into this fly's eye who is on the donut that Sam is eating, this slob. As him and Twitch are going to go check out the Bowery again, he coughs and barfs into this other guy's coffee. This is freaking disgusting. And look at this Jason Wynn page. It was a lot of text, but great artwork here, man. But just kind of giving some more depth to Jason Wynn and his motivations. Here's Terry. He's still going into the office. He's still at work. He gets sent a present that his secretary opens. It's a dead rat. So again, CIA is harassing him. The homeless people have made Spawn a throne out of junk and debris. So that kind of comes into play later, right, with the Spawn throne. Mr. Gravano checking up on the new and improved Overkill, which to me, honestly, looks exactly the same. Overkill is ready to join in on the hunt. Here's Terry Fitzgerald. His CIA agents are sitting right in front of his house. They're not even trying to hide. As they're sitting there, you have the mob coming after Terry Fitzgerald. They get into a shootout in the front yard. Terry jumps out and both parties start shooting at him. The mob kills the 2 CIA agents, which is not good because now you got Terry in his front yard with a gun, 2 dead. He decides to book it and he runs. Meanwhile, back at the Bowery, homeless people once again run up on Spawn to let him know that there is some trouble brewing. Overkill is back. Terry Fitzgerald is there. It all comes into a culmination in Spawn's backyard. Spawn goes to try to save Terry. He gets cornered by Sam and Twitch, so that's their first interaction. To get into part 3. There's actually an error in this book that I found. I didn't even realize, but here's the cover. We get this kind of breakdown of what's going on so far, kind of like a jumping on page. Double page spread of Overkill and Terry, and then look, same exact page. What is going on here? Anyway, Spawn's trying to explain what's going on to Sam and Twitch. He tells them the truth. Of course, they don't believe it. Spawn runs away. Twitch, who gets his nickname for the fact that he doesn't twitch, he's an exceptional shot, shoots him in the back of the kneecap. Spawn doesn't even miss a beat, continues running even though he got shot in the knee. Granny Blake tells Wanda Blake that Al came to visit, so this was kind of an interesting interaction here. I love Granny Blake. Shout out to Granny Blake. All right, Jason Wynn sitting in his office. He informs one of his employees to go to the neighbors of Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda Blake, prevent them from talking and exonerating Terry. They all have some kind of skeleton in their closet. One of them, they were illegal immigrants. The other one hasn't filed taxes, so nobody will come to Terry's defense. Spawn finally gets there. You can see his knee is still messed up, saves Terry from Overkill, and then they go to round 2. Once again, saves Terry, but this time he doesn't use any powers. His cape instinctually saves someone else that Spawn cares about for the first time. Twitch takes a couple shots at Overkill. Of course, it does nothing. Wanda finally gets back home. The mob told Terry that they had Wanda and their child, and they told him to meet at the Bowery where they knew Overkill would show up. But Wanda was really with Granny Blake. They were just bluffing. By the time she gets home, the news cameras are there. She tries to go to the neighbors, and here's where we find out that Jason Wynn's people got to them and that they can't help her at all. Wanda's life is crashing down. She's a widow. She rebuilt her life, but now her husband is being accused of murdering 2 agents. Sam takes that perfect shot, boom, right through the ear, messes up Overkill, and that's where we see Overkill just walk away, and apparently he shows up in Youngblood 7, which now I kind of want to read, to be honest. Now we have Spawn, Terry, and Sam and Twitch. Everyone's together. Issue 24, part 4 of The Hunt. Love this cover too. It felt very much like ASM 300 to me. As they're figuring out what's going on with Spawn, what's up with this dude in this costume, Terry comes to and overhears them call him Al. The bag lady called him Al, one of the homeless ladies, and now Terry hears that for the first time. He doesn't really put it together yet. Back to Jason Wynn. He's pissed off. Nothing is going his way. Terry Fitzgerald got away. Wanda's at home with Cyan. They're guarding her house. Spawn finally comes to, and Terry gets away because he realizes the mob still has my wife and kid, which they don't, but he runs the mob boss, getting his bad news. Sam and Twitch catch up to Terry, so he's not even able to get away. The mob still isn't done, so kind of like similar to an earlier issue where the cop car just ran through the Bowery. You had the same thing happen, but now they're going to run down Terry Fitzgerald. They're trying to finish the job. Spawn stands in the car's way, and what a crazy scene, man. They say it's almost like they ran into a steel pole at 65 miles per hour. The mob guys die. Crazy scene. So now Terry knows that he knows him, says that he's a friend. Cops show up. Everything just culminates here. And this is where Spawn decides to say, you know what? I'm going to let my presence be felt here. I've been hiding in the shadows. It's endangered his wife. It's endangered his friend. So now he declares that these alleys belong to Spawn. He's got the file on Jason Wynn. He's got the files on Vito Gravano. He ties up all the loose ends so that Terry gets exonerated and he's able to go back home. He's still freaked out that somebody was able to even do this to his life, uproot it, and then somebody was able to put it all back together like nothing ever happened. It's kind of funny. You see like this homeless guy now just sitting with these top secret files. All right, then the last issue, Tremor. So this is the Mark Silvestri art with the Todd McFarlane script, and it's the first appearance of a Spawn villain, kind of. Get a quick news breakdown of what's been going on. We're here in the Bowery with the homeless. Then we see Terry at his office, and Wanda shows up. She says, now I am going to take an interest in your job, and I am going to be a part of all this. I'm not going to just be playing a blind eye just because of what happened with Al. Then we see this guy sneak into this area, and there's this demon-looking creature here, and his name is Tremor. Tremor has a beef with the mob boss Gravano, and we find out why in this issue, but you're kind of led to believe at first this is just a demon from hell, but he's actually not. So here's Spawn reflecting on the events from the last issues and how he's marked his territory. He kind of snaps on one of these homeless guys that's trying to tell him something, but he's not really in a place where he wants to hear that. Flashback to Sam and Twitch. Twitch doesn't know why Sam is so happy. Didn't they lose? Well, not really, because he's got a file on Chief Banks that can cripple him, so really they're not going to be able to hinder Sam and Twitch any longer like they did when they sidelined him due to the Billy Kincaid stuff. Look at Spawn's cape here, man, on this chapel. Guys, this was such a great read, man. All right, but then we have Tremor. He's been calling for Spawn. That's what that homeless guy was trying to warn him of. Spawn walks up on him, tricks him with this cardboard cutout, and then we get a nice little battle between Spawn and Tremor. Pretty cool. Spawn's using his chains. Tremor looks like a dope enemy. Then we find out that he's got this kind of like Kung Fu Punch action figure type of left arm, which is what the toy had as well. But that's where we find out that he's not actually a demon. He was a human that Victor Gravano experimented on. It went wrong, and he became this deformed monster. So now he just wants revenge on a mutual enemy of Spawn. So that's where that ends. Man. So we do get a bunch of inks of these original covers, all 25 covers. We get the Todd McFarlane inks or the Great Capullo inks. So that's a great treat bonus here. We don't need to go through them all. Then we get an art gallery of iconic pinups and pages from these issues. So here's the first promo issue that Todd did on the Marvel Comics page, which is kind of funny. So that's the sketches and then the inks. Then you get some cool stuff like the pinup from issue 7. You get a Wizard promotional image. Here's like a sketch of issue 5, page 20, which you can see they changed it around a lot. Same with this image here, which was a tough issue to read, but damn, that was a good page. So yeah, the first full Violator, original inks. So that's where this ends. Oh yeah, but it also gives you some inks and then colors. So we saw like sketches to inks. Here's inks to colors. But yeah, let me give you my final thoughts on part 1 of the Spawn read-through. All right, and there we go, the first 25 issues of Spawn. I love this read, as you can probably tell. The artwork was incredible. I dug the storytelling, the characters, the dialogue. I love the guest writers and artists that Todd brought on. Let me know what you thought about the first part of my Spawn read-through, and make sure you stick around for part 2. Thanks for watching, and stay minty fresh. Peace.